I'd now like to request news anchor and principal correspondent Ashish Pari to moderate the discussion. A big round of applause to welcome them on the stage, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, namaste and welcome everyone. A big round of applause here for our panelists. I know this is the last session. A lot of you are tired. You heard a lot about climate. That applause was not just to welcome our guests. That was also to understand how many active listeners we have right now. So let's do it again. It's the final session. We've been cooperative. Let's do it again. A big round of applause for our panel of experts here. All right, that's better. We actually have one other guest who will be joining us soon. He's stuck in traffic, but let's continue here with RTG and also Mr. Amit Verma. A lot of you here sitting might have wondered, there is so much spoken about climate change. There's a lot of discussion that's happened today. There are a lot of international conferences, world leaders that talk about climate change, but why is nothing changing? Sometimes we wonder if the issue is we talk a lot about climate change and not much about climate action. And that's exactly is what we'll be discussing with our guests here, RTG. A lot of people you hear talking about the excitement when it comes to COP30 in Brazil. They say the climate clock is ticking. We don't hear it, but we of course feel it, especially in a place like the Delhi NCR. COP29. Before we talk about COP30, let's talk about COP29. There was a lot of things said. There were a lot of promises made, a lot of announcements made as well. But when it comes to climate finance, hardly anything was delivered. Where does India stand at this moment? Because at the end of the day, it's the developing nations, it's the developed nations that actually do all the talking. But when it comes to financing, they take a step back. What role does India play to ensure that these so-called developed nations actually come forward and pay up for climate action as well?
Thanks very much for your question, and we are cutting to chase in the last session. We are hitting the nail right on the head when we talk about finance, and everybody knows that's the elephant in the room, so to speak. Every year, so many COP discussions only break down at the point of developed nations either shifting goalpost or not being in a position to commit conclusively to what is finance, how can climate finance move, what is it that they can do in being able to fulfill their historical responsibility. And I think we have literally come to a point now in the world that we are looking at multiple battles and wars being fought across the world, while we are still continuing with the battle on finance as it was 10, 15 years ago. When the Copenhagen COP happened in 2009, there was a random and arbitrary figure that was agreed of $100 billion per year. None of that was delivered till 2023, when magically it was said that 100 billion has now been delivered. And when the COP happened in Dubai and after that in Baku, the whole discussion mainly was that if $100 billion per year was a figure that we lived with for the 15 years, how is it that a new collective quantified goal will be achieved? In the COP jargon, it used to be called the NCQG. It still is referred to as the NCQG, which means what's the new number? How will you quantify it? And how is it collective, which means which countries will contribute? And again, as you can imagine, with the realities of the world are shifting so much that in the last 15 to 17 years, it's literally come to a point where none of the developed countries want to put in $1 without China being in the room, just because of the situation of China as a superpower in all aspects. And therefore, it's almost like you keep adding problems, but you don't come to a solution. I would say as regards India's stand, it's at least two strands. Internationally, we are the voice of the global south. We also speak unified with members of G77 and like-minded countries, and therefore we keep our stance that India speaks about historical responsibility to be completed and developed world to make a contribution and make sure that to the developing world they provide new finance, concessional finance, and finance which can actually help development in least developing countries. None of that is happening. There is another side which is slightly more exciting, which speaks to India's renewable targets, which speaks to India's electrification of transport, and also speaks to a lot of private finance coming, where really the excitement is. And I think when we talk about finance, and I will pause here, we'll have more time to discuss. When we talk about finance, it's important to keep two things always in mind, that we have to be the flag bearers of showing the world where their responsibility is and where they are not delivering. But at the same time, we cannot afford to waste any time, which is not what we are doing, and which is why we are also making sure that we are thinking about what are the innovative ways to bring finance into our industry, into our new and renewable energy, into our electric vehicle space, so that we are also keeping going, whilst at the same time keeping our voice in the world loud and clear, that Global South and a lot of the developing countries have never received the climate finance that was promised. And actually, it's not just a question of climate finance, it's a question of justice, it's a question of equity and fairness, and that's where it becomes really complicated and three-dimensional.